Juice Wells is absolutely crucial for Ole Miss to beat South Carolina, and he is also the reason why this is going to be an absolutely nuts environment on Saturday.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. On today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast, we're breaking down the key factors of Saturday's matchup between Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss Rebels and the South Carolina Gamecocks. With Juice Wells returning to South Carolina, this could be the most intense atmosphere that Ole Miss sees all season. But his role will be absolutely critical for Ole Miss in a game that is as close to a must-win as you can have at the beginning of October. How the Ole Miss Rebels handle the noise and distractions following the Kentucky game will be critical. Saturday's outcome may very well shape the trajectory of the entire season. And don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy provides other perspectives on college football, the SEC, and Ole Miss. So check them out as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So Juice Wells is returning to Columbia, South Carolina and the South Carolina Gamecocks. And judging by my comments over the last 8 months since Juice Wells committed, I'm assuming this is going to be a pretty big game for South Carolina fans, and they're going to turn Williams-Brice Stadium into a cauldron. Now, it's going to be a garnet out. I don't know what that's going to look like. I imagine it's going to look pretty sharp, though. And that little segment of powder blue, and if you need powder blue, you can go to College Corner and get that right now, is going to stand out pretty significantly in this game. But for Ole Miss to beat South Carolina, as fired up as they are, when Juice Wells transferred out to Ole Miss, South Carolina circled this game. And they have circled this game the whole time. They want to win this game more than they want air at this point. And the reason that is because they think that Juice Wells basically took their NIL money, redshirted, didn't play, refused to play, and ended up transferring out to go get other teams' NIL money. That's what South Carolina thinks happened. Now, Juice Wells required surgery when he got to Ole Miss, so that isn't what happened. But that is what they think happened, and that narrative has been allowed to persist, and now everybody just kind of runs with it. Ole Miss lost against the Kentucky Wildcats, a team that the South Carolina Gamecocks beat 31-3 in Lexington. So South Carolina is a good team. They can beat you. They have good players. But here's the thing. Ole Miss lost that game not because of what Kentucky did. They lost that game because of what Ole Miss did. Offensively, one of the worst game plans that I've ever seen, period. I mean, you have to go back 10, 15 years for the last time I saw an Ole Miss offensive game plan in the first half as bad as this week. It was not good. It was pretty atrocious. And they focused way too much on Tre Harris, which is weird because if you go back to the proof of concept in this offense that Ole Miss has put out there over the last year or two, this offense functions at its best when there are multiple targets on offense and the running game is working. Duh. It's one of those things. But if you go back to LSU, Caden Prescorn, Jordan Watkins, Tre Harris had his huge day. The running backs, Ulysses Bentley had a big day that day. But Ole Miss was able to get right after a game against Alabama that looked remarkably similar to that Kentucky game, by the way, but I digress on that. They got right by having variability in their offense and making it to where by the fourth quarter, LSU just quit. The defense knew they couldn't get a stop. Ole Miss can do whatever they wanted to do. And honestly, Ole Miss did do whatever they wanted to do. The offense, when it gets good, when it becomes unstoppable, has variability in what they're attacking. And I realize that the best player in all of college football might be Tre Harris this year. He's averaging 160 yards a catch. He's averaging 10 catches a game. He's doing right now basically what Amari Cooper did at Alabama in 2014 or something like that. What Marquise Lee did in 2011 at USC. That type of stuff is the same thing that Tre Harris is doing. So I get it. I understand it. Lane Kiffin and Steve Sarkisian are from the Norm Chow school of offense which basically means a matchup-based passing game. They want to look at their receivers, what is set up, and figure out the best way to make your defense hurt. That's what they do. They're very successful with it, both him and Sark. But what I'm saying here is Ole Miss has the weapons offensively to where it doesn't just have to be one player. You can have your matchups and still try to get the ball to Tre Harris as much as possible. But no, the more you do it, the more the defense is going to shade that way. The way you can take him off of Tre Harris is by focusing on another player in the offense and using that matchup. And with Juice Wells being a former All-SEC preseason level player, he feels like the natural option to make a defense hurt when they start giving too much attention to Tre Harris. So Juice Wells is going to be absolutely crucial if Ole Miss's offense is going to get back on track and do the things that we expect them to do. Juice Wells has 4 touchdowns this year. This isn't a situation that's different. He's caught deep balls. He's done whatever's necessary. And he has been a very good target for Jackson Dart. And he's helped Tre Harris. Last game was the first game that just got weird. It kind of got overboard. And it could have been the fact that Ole Miss had trouble getting first downs. But Ole Miss might have had trouble getting first downs because they were focusing on Tre Harris. It's a chicken or the egg situation. But the fact of the matter is, Ole Miss needed to run the ball better than they did because Ole Miss ran the ball 3 times in the first half. It absolutely horrible. You have to at least try to run the football. When you don't, when the defense knows it's going to be a pass, every player in the Southeastern Conference has the ability to get to the quarterback when they do not have to respect the run. These are some of the best college football players in the entire country. You have to make them respect the run. And Ole Miss's offense runs better when they have play action pass to go off of, whenever you can fool the defense from time to time. Listen, if Ole Miss does not change, South Carolina is going to watch what Kentucky did, and they're going to imitate that entirely defensively. Ole Miss is in danger of establishing a reputation right now of how this offense can be stopped. Listen, Mike Leach, whenever he was at Mississippi State, God rest his soul, whenever he was at Texas Tech and Washington State, I think it was Washington State where they first figured this out. They had so much trouble stopping a Texas Tech offense. If you remember back to even 2008, when Ole Miss beat Texas Tech in the Cotton Bowl, Texas Tech just went straight up and down the field a couple of times before Ole Miss's defensive line kind of established control of that game. It wasn't until Chris Peterson just said, hey, drop 8, when he did the coaching football for dummies thing, reading that out like the water boy, and just figured out, I was like, hey, we're just going to make you pass it in very small windows and go down the field without messing up. And when he did that, he was able to get control of what's going on. Ole Miss's offense is in danger of something similar happening. You have a situation that defensive coordinators are getting an idea how to handle these matchup-based football plays. So the way you change that is to at least make it look like a progression again. Whenever you focus on Juice one play, Tre one play, you run the ball a couple of times, you have variability in your offense. It's going to be better and it's going to be harder for the defense to stop. That's just the way this works. So we'll see. All I know is that Juice Wells is absolutely crucial for the Ole Miss Rebels in this game against South Carolina. Absolutely crucial. And I don't even know if I brought this up yet, but I'll bring it up now. This is going to be the host of a hostile environment that they play in 2024. Absolutely. And defensively, we'll talk about this in the next segment. They need to clean up the penalties because it is the weakness of the defense right now. The defense is okay, but the fact that their confidence is getting shook a little bit and they can't actually just play the position because of these penalties, it's causing the back end of that defense to be problematic. And like I said in this segment, the whole offense cannot be focused on Tre Harris. There needs to be more actors in this offense. Because if you look at it, Juice Wells is going to be crucial. He's averaged 20 yards per catch, 4 touchdowns. And the first 4 games of the season, he absolutely went off. Not a lot of catches, but he went off. And I would take Juice Wells, honestly, and put him in the slot this week and line him up on the same side of the field as Tre Harris and say, hey, take one of them away. And then whichever one they take away, hit the other one. and find out exactly what that defense can do. Get the defensive line. They have a very good defensive line, but get them ready to go and moving side to side. And if you do that, you are going to be okay. This defense is good. It is not elite. It is not as good as Kentucky's defense, but it is good. And if you saw what LSU was able to do against them a couple of weeks back in a game that honestly South Carolina should have won, but they had trouble against the pass as the game went on. If Lane Kiffin looked at the film at all, there should be a decent way to attack that down the field, either by using Tre Harris himself or using Tre as a decoy for a player like Juice Wells or Caden Lee or even Aiden Williams or Jordan Watkins, any of those guys. So it should be a really interesting deal for Ole Miss in this game. You know, penalties can cost you big time in the SEC. You know, we've warned it could happen to Ole Miss, and we warned that it would cost Ole Miss a game. And now that it might have happened, Ole Miss has got to fix this fast before it becomes their reputation. Tune in for what needs to change only on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. It is my time to highlight my Roy Player of the Week. Roy is a new platform that lets you make contributions directly to your favorite athletes. Download the Roy app on iOS or Android and enter the code Locked On. That's 2 words, and you'll automatically be entered to win a sweepstakes of $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. This week we've selected Suntarine Perkins because despite losing his 2-sack game against Kentucky, I'm giving Suntarine Perkins $100 on Roy. If you were impressed as I was with his performance on Saturday, you can show him some love too. Just hop on the Roy app and throw him a few bucks. If everyone pitches in just $10, it adds up fast for Suntarine Perkins. Now you have a chance to show your appreciation for Suntarine Perkins and his standout performance this week, as well as what he'll continue to bring to the program. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy. Really interesting stuff. And he has been a quarterback in recent weeks for Ole Miss's defense. Against Wake Forest, he had a sack and interception. He had 2 sacks against the Kentucky Wildcats. Really good player. And when you look at the front 7 of this defense, it's led by Chris Paul, who is leading the team in tackles for loss. He has 4 quarterback hurries, 2.5 sacks. He has been playing unbelievably well as this season goes on. 37 tackles totally. The front 7 of this defense has been really good this season. They're giving up less than 2 yards per run. Even Kentucky, who had a little bit of success running the football against Ole Miss on Saturday, averaged less than 2 yards per carry. Ole Miss on the defensive line, they've been getting after the quarterback. We mentioned Suntarine Perkins, but also Princely and Monmielen had a sack and a half in that game. And like J.J. Pegues and Walter Nolan are also very important figures. So defensive line and linebackers, they're doing really well and doing what needs to be done. Ole Miss is hard to get first downs against. We always talk about how Ole Miss on third down was a problem. I think Kentucky was 4 of 16 on third down. Now they were 3 for 3 on fourth down, but they were 4 of 16 on third down. And that shows how difficult it could be. And props out on the back end of the defense. Jaden Kennedy played better than he has been doing. Isaiah Hamilton did have that weird 4th and 7 pass, but he was pushed off on that nobody called. If that was Ole Miss on the other side doing it, you can guarantee there would be a flag in that situation. And the weird thing in that game is Ole Miss's best cornerback, Trey Amos, was a little bit picked on. And they went at him because of the way he plays the position. And he got handsy and got a little bit of a reputation and was able to get a couple of flags on third downs. If you want to look at the drive right before the half that Ole Miss let Kentucky score a touchdown, Kentucky only scored that touchdown because of defensive penalties from the secondary. It's a problem. Ole Miss is developing a reputation on that part of the defense as somebody that gets handsy. They just do. Somebody that grabs. Somebody that you can double move and they will reach out and grab a jersey and get you a first down. And offenses have noticed, as good as Ole Miss's defense is, the way you can keep drives going and stay on the field is by getting those flags and letting Ole Miss kind of self-destruct on themselves, which over the last 3 or 4 games, that has happened defensively. The one problem that everybody who's been saying, even when Ole Miss was playing their, quote, cupcakes, was the defensive secondary and the flags. Ole Miss has somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 yards in penalties over the last 3 games. Kentucky literally tried to take advantage of that. And this is how I'll point that out, okay? Kentucky knew that this was problematic. They went for it on their own 20-yard line, and it was a 4th and 7, and they threw up a basic punt. Do you know why they threw up a punt? Because they were counting on the fact that Ole Miss would hold, that Ole Miss would grab, that Ole Miss would interfere with. It is the reputation that other teams have on Ole Miss's defense, and they are starting to work the sidelines from the very beginning to where officials notice it by the end of the game. Ole Miss gets no leeway in the back end of the defense. So Ole Miss needs to fix this a couple of games. They need to play relatively clean against South Carolina. They need to win this game. South Carolina is not a good passer of the ball. They're not. They do not throw the ball very well. Now, they run the ball better than Kentucky did, but they do not throw the ball particularly well. Now, Lenore Sellers is supposed to be back this weekend, and he is a different animal than Robbie Ashford. And if we're going to be honest, if Sellers stays in the game against LSU, if he doesn't get hurt, South Carolina probably beats LSU. And they're sitting at 4 or 5-0 right now, whatever that would be. So his struggles throwing the ball doesn't mean he can't do it. It just means their offense is going to look a little bit different. Their offensive coordinator at South Carolina came from Arkansas. He's on the Kendall Briles tree. And Kendall Briles came from working with Lane Kiffin, so a lot of their stuff that they do is similar. So the defense is going to know and have an idea exactly what South Carolina's offense is going to do. The offense is going to look similar. But expect a healthy dose of double moves. Expect duck and chuck, where they throw the ball downfield multiple times in the game. Expect them to try and bait Ole Miss to commit those penalties to keep their offense on the field. South Carolina had 215 yards of total offense against Kentucky and won the game 31-3. What does that tell you about this offense that Ole Miss is about to face? That tells me they're opportunistic. They did a good job defensively controlling field position to where they had short fields, and they were probably starting drives in the plus territory to where 1 or 2 of those, they were able to get them into the end zone. That's what it tells me. That means they're opportunistic. That means they know how to use their defense. And whenever you take that with the fact that you're going into an absolute cauldron on Saturday afternoon because of Juice Wells and the energy they are going to give the South Carolina team is going to be pronounced. And Ole Miss is the hunted this season. We saw against Kentucky, Ole Miss not dealing well with being the hunted. It takes a moment to get used to that. And a lot of times when you think you're the hunted, it doesn't last that long because eventually you're not the hunted anymore. This game, South Carolina has an off week before the Ole Miss game, in a game that Ole Miss is the hunted, that they desperately want to do it, and the crowd is going to be unbelievably jacked up because of Juice Wells. You see this problematic thing. So you want to talk about officials getting intimidated, officials getting barked at. They are going to be quick to throw that flag on Ole Miss. So what Ole Miss probably needs to do is not close their fist. Just do what you can. I understand that you need to put your hand on a receiver from time to time because of what's going on. Do not close your fist at all. Don't push off. Don't close your fist. But if you put your hand on the back of the receiver to keep it close, that's a different story. Do not close your fist. That invites holding. That invites grabbing. Do what you can. Play the game the way that you normally do. Do not close your fist. If you do that, you're probably going to be okay. South Carolina does have a wide receiver that is a 99 on NCAA football 25, a track guy. So Ole Miss probably needs to be aware of him. And I expect South Carolina to make plays in the kicking game because Beamer ball is now Shane Beamer, and they usually go after punts, kickoffs. They do a decent job in these special teams that you need to look out for. But Ole Miss needs to clean up the penalties this week. It's not they need to clean them up just open-ended. No, this week before this game, they need to, because penalties can cost you this ball game. And if you allow them to stay on the field, you will lose the game. If you allow the crowd to stay in it, you will lose the game. Ole Miss needs to come out with a game plan to attack, to take the crowd out of it, and play good, fundamentally sound defense. If they do that, they're going to win the game, no problem. They're 10-point favorites on the road as it is. So we'll see exactly how it goes. Up next, here's something you don't hear every day. This is why Ole Miss needs to not focus on Tre Harris so much. Could shifting the spotlight change the game for the Rebels? Find out right after this. Hello, NFL fans. You can start the season off with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. It is the place to bet on which side of Ole Miss being -9.5 for Saturday's game against South Carolina. And the over-under right now is at 52.5 for the Rebels as well. Ole Miss would have gone about that number on their own in 2 of their first 3 games or something like that. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view the play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Okay, we're going to go back and circle back a little bit to yesterday's show, and that was that Ole Miss focusing too much on Tre Harris got the offense in trouble. And it allowed them to not get first downs, and, well, maybe that allowed them not to get first downs. Maybe something else allowed them to not get first downs. But that didn't help whenever Kentucky knew exactly where they needed to defend. They needed to defend a quarter of the field, something like that. And when they didn't, they got hurt. He ended up with 11 catches for like 170 yards and a touchdown. Like I said, good player, but Kentucky's defense was able to focus on it because whenever Tre Harris is the supreme de facto focus of the Ole Miss offense, that makes it easier on the defense. Whenever the defense can single up Juice Wells, Caden Priestcorn, and Caden Lee, and not necessarily worry about the running game because Ole Miss has become one-dimensional, that's at best problematic. So a key in the South Carolina game is going to be using different players at different times to attack South Carolina's defense. Now, granted, use Tre Harris with your goes and your sail routes and stuff like that. Absolutely. Use him the same way you did against LSU and against Penn State and against Texas A&M a year ago. All 3 of those were monster games for Tre Harris, but he wasn't the focus of those games. Ole Miss needs to figure out a way to use jet sweeps. The jet sweep needs to come back. I am saying that over and over again with Caden Lee and Juice Wells and those players. Ole Miss needs to figure out a way to attack side to side. Get those defensive linemen running. When you're doing the tempo that you're doing, if you can get that defensive line to go side to side, it's going to make it to where they get off a little bit slower. I think Ole Miss needs to bring a screen game into the game. If you're not going to use Henry Parrish and the running backs as much as you have in previous years, I think a screen game obviously needs to be put in the system. Henry Parrish, again, had 3 carries in the first half last week, had 13 overall. Ole Miss intentionally did not run the ball. And on the season right now, they are about 52% run to pass. Now, they passed more against Furman, and they passed real close to 50-50 against Kentucky. So Ole Miss needs to get back to what they're doing. They need to run the football. They need to do that, but they should use the screen game as well, both jailbreak, both bubble, And of course, just the standard running back screen game, because that will make your entire offense more effective, especially against a team on the defensive line that wants to get off the ball. I know that these plays are in Ole Miss's system. I've seen them being run before. And Ole Miss needs 12 personnel in the system. They just do. If you're not going to make the slot receiver an important aspect of your offense, I'm not asking for Elijah Moore, but I'm asking for what Jordan Watkins was a year ago. If you're not willing to do that, go to 12 personnel to where you at least have another stable blocker on the field with some decent pass catchers. That variability is going to help Ole Miss's offense. Listen, Lane Kiffin has done this before. He did this last year. Against Alabama, they got stagnant. They got stale. The offense was all 20 yards downfield. We all talked about that, to where that is something that you had to worry about. Everybody was worried about the LSU game. Does everybody remember that? I was like, oh my goodness, LSU's coming to town with Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors and all those dudes. What are we going to do? Ole Miss had LSU's defense ready to quit by the end by using a variability offensive tack. That's all I want. I want the Penn State game plan. I want the LSU game plan. I want Texas A&M game plan. That's what I want. I'm not asking for anything new, anything crazy. I just want some variability to make the defense have to pay attention to all 52 and a half yards and to every blade of grass behind them, to where they're constantly worried and they don't know where Ole Miss is going to attack. Whenever Tre Harris is the focal point of the offense, you know that the field is basically cut in half. And it makes it a lot easier on the defensive line. It makes it easier on the linebackers. It makes it easy on the other cornerback whenever you basically have plays that you can take off. And we'll see. Like I said, I think that Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss are going to do this because they realize exactly what position Ole Miss football is in at the moment. Ole Miss football, like I said, it's not a must-win game, but it's as close to a must-win as you can get without actually being one. It's a game that Ole Miss needs to win the game. They need to get through this game, and they need to get through the LSU game. 2 road games, 2 very difficult environments, and it's going to be 6:30 at night in Tiger Stadium. That's going to be a chore. And then you have Oklahoma, and then you have Arkansas. So you have about 4 games that is going to define your season. If you can pull them off and handle these keys and do what you need to do, you're probably going to come out 5-1 and getting ready for LSU with a chance to honestly make all right. Because if you beat LSU, that just cancels out the Kentucky game. Now, you can't afford to lose to Arkansas or Oklahoma or Florida or State, but you know what I mean. It kind of puts you back on serve. And if that happens, you will be all right moving forward. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for all things Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast out there. Your support means the world to us. Thank you very much for making us your first listen today. Now go check out Locked On College Football Podcast. From NIL deals to the never-ending conference realignment rumors, Spencer McLaughlin gets you ready for an exciting season on the gridiron. You can find the link to Locked On College Football in the description, so you don't need to search. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, exciting news, you can now become a Locked On Ole Miss Insider, the best and easiest way to stay updated on all things Ole Miss sports. It's a texting program that sends you notifications on anything relevant without all of the hassle of message boards filled with trolls. Enjoy a 14-day free trial and experience the future of college sports coverage. You know, we're adding new perks as we grow, so don't miss out. The link is down in the description. And for those of you watching on YouTube, we'll send you to Locked On College Sports now. Howdy toddy, everyone.